Hi everyone, back for part two of my video on why is it always about you. In the first video I said I was going to mention a couple of things that I didn't like about the book, and the author was kind of um, uh, basically saying she didn't like the California task force to promote self-esteem. Basically, that's, what she said. Now, what I went back and I downloaded a copy of that. Okay, um, you can download the final report of the California Task Force to promote self-esteem and personal and social responsibility. Okay, that's the name of it. You can download that for free online. It's simple, it's easy to find. Um, um, I think I found it on ERIC, which is one of the a website for education. And I urge you to do this. And while maybe developing self-esteem isn't the cure-all, fix-all, I'm sure elevating individuals' self-esteem for those that need it leads to a happier sense of being. Um, so go ahead, it's laid out real well where you can actually kind of skip through and get to the highlights of different sections, if you didn't want to read the entire uh, report. But what I've done is I've taken some points from it, and there's an awful lot more. But here's my first point. Establish a juvenile justice system that will develop personal responsibility in juvenile offenders by consistently imposing appropriate sanctions for every criminal act. Okay? Number two, support and implement programs that assist long-term welfare dependency recipients to grow in self-esteem and responsibility so they can move from the welfare roles to independence. Okay. Sounds good to me. You want to get away from that learned helplessness. And they talk about learned helplessness in the report as well. Number three, public and private industry should institute policies to meet the changing needs of the American family. For example, job site childcare, flex time work schedules, job sharing, and parental leave. Employers should be encouraged to implement programs, policies, and practices uh, that are an esteeming environment for workers and their families. Okay, I don't hear anything that I'm having an issue with. Four, give students opportunities to do community service. Excellent. Five, formulate a real-life skills curriculum. Six, create community partnerships to develop after-school activities. And there was, and I assume still is, one of these after-school programs in the district that I used to work at, and I thought it was great. It was very successful. A lot of the kids participated. Parents were working. A lot of parents in the district I worked in couldn't afford to have sitters, so the kids were able to go after school to this program, get their homework done, there were adults that assisted them. And then after they were done, there was some time where they could engage in sports and things like that. And the report has self-esteem defined. It says, appreciating my own worth and importance and having the character to be accountable for myself and to act responsibly toward others. And then it says, every child needs to be treated with respect, consistently, and from the earliest moments of life. And it's interesting, being treated with respect, whatever the environment. And when I started working in the school district, corporal punishment was still allowed. It wasn't until 1986 that it was banned. So again, I urge you, please read the report. And it doesn't, the report doesn't lay out strategies on how to accomplish everything, but it certainly didn't birth a generation of students that equated self-esteem with feeling good and not doing good, as the author of the book suggests. At least that's my opinion. Um, and while working in the school system at that time, teachers continued to challenge students both academically and behaviorally. I know that because I was in the school system. You know, teachers continue to differentiate between students, use techniques such as scaffolding to assist students that were falling behind. I mean, they were still challenging students. Now, the author isn't alone in her criticism about the self-esteem concept. When I was doing a little digging about this area, I found an article from Roy Baumeister entitled "Rethinking Self-Esteem: Why Nonprofits Should Stop Pushing Self-Esteem and Start Endorsing Self-Control." And he's under the misconception that schools don't endorse self-control. This is just not correct. And I can attest as a school psychologist that I spent a good deal of my time working with teachers, students, parents, devising ways to work with students on improving behavior. And the idea that you know, you have to have one or the other, you know, work on self-esteem or, you know, work on self-control. I mean, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can do both. Um, so this isn't a binary scenario. Now, some students learn at different rates. Some students are better than others in certain areas. And the author wrote that basically students were expecting to be valued regardless of how they performed. Well, yes, shouldn't you value someone even if they couldn't perform well in math? Now, I'm hoping I'm misinterpreting what she's suggesting here. Now, Dweck, in her book Mindset from 2006, explains that students should be reinforced when they've tried to figure out a problem, and you reinforce them, and it keeps them trying. Because see, the idea is you're reinforcing the fact that they're putting in an effort, even though they might be struggling with mastering that particular task. So you can cue, you can scaffold to assist the student toward mastery. Now, the author also questioned advancing students. I think it was this book. I think she questioned the idea of advancing students even though they hadn't mastered certain curriculum. Well, the problem here is if you hold them back, if you retain them, the idea is that if they get too old by the time they get into high school, they're going to be much more likely to drop out. Okay. Now, the author suggests that the self-esteem movement has been discredited. Really? Now, let's read the long-term effects of self-esteem on depression, the roles of alcohol and substance uses during young adulthood. This is by Park and Yang. And you're going to get a whole different viewpoint here. Now, in fairness to the author, this research is from 2017, so it's much later than when her book was published. I've got another quote here. Low self-esteem characterized by feelings of worthlessness and incapability is often seen in people seeking therapy for depression. That's from Thomas A. Veeder, MD. He's a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at the Oregon Health and Science University School of Medicine in Portland, Oregon. And I took that from Psych Central. And also taken from Psych Central, there's evidence that low self-esteem may be a learned behavior, and learning ways to boost your self-esteem may help symptoms of depression. So my take, working with students to bolster self-esteem when needed sounds vital to me. A couple more quick points. She wasn't happy with Pumsy, the dragon puppet, who basically at that time was teaching students that I am me and I'm enough. And this basically was a reference to a drug-free life. You know, back then in the 80s, you know, there was that big issue with drugs, and this was kind of saying, the idea was, I'm saying no to drugs, is what that was about. Okay, and also Pumsy was working on conflict resolution. I remember talking with one of the counselors who used it, and a lot of the kids, it's kind of like play therapy. It was useful. Finally, if I understood her correctly, she mentioned she was talking about how an individual decides to worship, if at all, was somewhat of an issue. Let's see if I can say this right. I think basically that how an individual decides to worship is their own business. But she was kind of mentioning like spirituality rather than orthodox worship being an issue, and I got the feeling she was suggesting that it breeds narcissism, and I don't see anything out there that suggests that spirituality as opposed to orthodox worshiping is any more likely to breed individuals with narcissism. So again, you might want to, if you're reading the book, that's toward the end of the book, you might want to see if I'm interpreting that correctly or if I'm on target on that one. Anyway, okay, I had to get that out there because, yeah, there were a couple of things that I thought needed to be addressed.